Shabbat Shalom, everyone, and Chag Sameach. Welcome to this opportunity for us to celebrate Torah by looking at the Torah scrolls themselves, a number of our Torah scrolls, and to see some of the amazing features within them, some of what it is that makes each Torah scroll the same and yet different. In a way, they are representations of the Jewish people and of all of the different ways that the Jewish people can be at home together. In a way, all of us, of course, are unique. Each one of us has different aspects to us, and yet, by our choosing to be part of the covenant of our people, to be part of the Brit, to be part of the people of Israel, we also affirm something that we can share together. And Torah is one of the most amazing aspects of our togetherness. That Torah is what binds all Jewish people to one another, even though the Ashkenazi way of designing the scroll is different than the Sephardi way. Nevertheless, the letters within are the same. That's why the Torah creates my favorite number. Do you have a favorite number? What is it? Tell me. Oh, well, I can't really hear you. You can put it in the chat if you want. But I'll tell you my favorite number. Some of you even may know it. My favorite number is 304,805. Oh, wait a minute. Let me say that to you again. My favorite number is 304,805 because that is the number of letters that we find in a Torah scroll. It takes 304,805 letters in order to make up a scroll. And so when we do that, when we create a scroll, if we have every letter, then we have a Torah scroll. But if we have 304,804 or 806, then in fact, it is no longer a Torah scroll. And that's not an easy thing to do. Imagine what it takes to do that, to write the right letter 304,805 times. It's a pretty incredible thing to try to do. It's a very difficult thing to do. And so here we're looking at the last number of sections of our newest scroll, our scroll that we call Matan Torah, that was written in honor of Temple's 50th anniversary. And there we have the very end of the scroll. And you can see, interestingly enough, that each column, as we look at it, starts with the same letter. Every column of the Torah, almost every column, all of them but 4, begin with the letter Vav most of the time. Now, in ancient writing, we find that there were certain columns that had to start with certain words, and ve'aida, this word that's at the beginning of Parashat Ha'azinu, which is chapter 32 of the book of Deuteronomy, that word has always been one that begins, of course, it begins with a vav, but is used at the top of a column. But later on, it became a practice to create what are called vavei ha'amudim, that in the description of the tabernacle in the wilderness, they talk about the vavs, the hooks that held up the columns of the tabernacle on the yeriot, on the curtains. And yet each piece of parchment here, like the one they're attached right here to one another, is called a yeriyah, like a curtain. And that each of the columns in the Torah is called an amud, amudim. And so we create vavim, hooks, vavs, that bind the scroll together and remind us always to have our life be a life of and, a life of addition, a life of learning, and a life of connection. And as we get to the end of the Torah scroll, what do we find here? We find that as we come to the end of the Torah, not only does each column begin with a vav, but in fact we have the last words in every scroll. That it says in the last full line in a bit that we remember Ayad HaChazakah, the mighty hand, Ulachol HaMorah HaGadol, and all of the great awesome works, Asher Asa Moshe, that Moses did, le'enei kol Yisrael, before the eyes of the entire people of Israel. Now look at that last word, Israel. Israel, of course, is the name of our people as well as the name of our land and the name of our state. But look at that word, and I want you to see how it is here. Notice that a lot of words in Torah scrolls are made up of that letters are made up of other letters. So if you look at the resh, that is the middle letter in Yisrael, you can see that the resh is also the base of the lamed, of the last letter. But on top of that is added an additional yud, just like the first letter in the word. That it's very common to make letters out of pieces of other letters. And I want you to remember not only that, and to look at these and to see how they're going to look different when we look at another one of our Torah scrolls to see the beginning of the scroll, so that we can see that while there is a traditional lettering, that we can see the handprint of every scribe in each scroll. And I want you to remember as well what the last letter in the Torah is. So there it is, le'enei kol Yisrael, before the eyes of all Israel. And we know that we not only are supposed to finish the scroll here, but we're supposed to immediately read the scroll again, as we will. So let's see what happens when we go back to the beginning. Well, here we are at the beginning. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. That in the beginning of creating, God made the heavens and the earth. And of course, the bet of Bereshit is not a vav. It's one of those lines that never, of course, begins with a vav. But I want you to look carefully at the letter as well. Look at the aleph. And if you can remember the aleph from the previous scroll, then you'll know that these two alephs involved different handwriting. We'll compare it again in the next scroll that we look at. But you can see, if you look at the other alephs on the page, that many of the alephs have this extra line in them, and some of them do not, right? If you look at the first three words, there's an aleph in each word. And Bereshit, the aleph is the third letter of the Torah, has an extra line that makes the bottom of the left-hand part of the letter into a yud. But then in bara, the aleph does not include that line, and in Elohim, the letter does not include that line. It doesn't again until we go down, further down on the daf, on this page, and we find in the fourth line, when it says, toward the end of the line, Vayar Elohim et ha'or, God saw the light, ki tov, that it was good. Vayar, that word, just like Vayomer Elohim, the last word on the previous line, also has that extra line. There are all these different traditions that make a Torah scroll, that each one was written by a different scribe who had different habits and different ways of making the letters. Some of those are shared, and some of those are different from one scribe to another. Oh, and what did we say the last letter in the scroll was? The last letter was a lamed, and the first letter is a bet. What does that spell? That's right, lev, because the Torah is the heart of the Jewish people. It is that beating muscle that enables us to continue to live and to go forward and to be what and who we are. So the letters in the Torah scroll are pretty amazing, but it's not only the letters that are special. See, sometimes, in fact, it's not the letters, it is the spaces between the letters that are impressive and amazing. That here we're looking at part of chapter 6 of the book of Bamidbar, the book of Numbers, as it's called in English. And what do we have here? Well, if we read from the beginning of this new paragraph, Vayidaber Adonai el Moshe lemor, daber el Aharon ve'el banav lemor, ko tevarchu et bnei Yisrael amor lahem. That God said to Moses, saying, speak to Aaron and to his children, saying, following is how you shall bless the people of Israel. This is the priestly benediction. Very most famous words and the common blessing that's still used today. Yevarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. May God bless you and keep you. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'chuneka. May God shine the divine presence upon you and be gracious to you. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. God should lift up the divine presence to you. Actually, you should be worthy of God looking up to you, v'yasem lecha shalom, and giving you peace. Those words are incredible, but look at the white space among the words. What is it that the priests of our people have historically done? They make a shin from their hand. They divide their fingers so that they can make part of the name Shaddai and the word Shalom and bless the people. And look at what we have in the white space. We have again there, the hand of the priest is written onto the scroll in the blank spaces of the parchment. It's not only the letters that speak. It's the way they're laid out and the way they're made present on the page. Oh, and here where we are in the book of Numbers, if we move ourselves along further in the book, we find one of the places where the Torah, in fact, doesn't begin a line. I'm a little too close there. So here we are, having moved forward in the book of Bamidbar, in the book of Numbers, and we do find one of the very few places in the Torah where the line never begins with a vav. It begins with these words that we've begun our services with most mornings and even during the shutdown, every day during this week of Sukkot leading up to Shmini Atzeret and Simchat Torah. What does it say? It says, Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov, mishkanotecha Yisrael. How good are your tents, O Jacob, your dwelling places, O Israel. This time has been an amazing time for us. It is a time where we learn why it is that our people imagined their places of being as an ohel, as a tent. Not only because maybe our ancestors dwelt in a less firm residence than we do, but because home is not a thing. A home is a feeling. It is a place where when we travel, we know that what is most valuable and most meaningful travels with us. And it is a mishkan, a place that is part of a shchunah, part of a neighborhood. It connects us to other people, and where the Shekhinah, God's indwelling presence, can be felt. All of those make this line of blessing so important that it stands out in Torah, just as it stands out in our words of blessing in our Siddur each and every day. It is an amazing thing to get a chance to see the Torah scroll, to sense again there with the Aleph that there's slightly different in each and every Torah scroll, because we see a hand, not just the hand of the priests, but a human hand that was committed to making sure that Judaism continues and that our learning and our Torah continues. To do it how many times, right? How many letters are there in the complete Torah scroll? That's right, 304,805. May there be that many and more blessings for each of us on this Simchat Torah as we're about to hear the Torah read, to hear the ending and the beginning of the Torah. May we be inspired to always learn more about our scroll, to learn more about the history of our people, and to celebrate the role of others and each of our individual role in seeing that Torah can continue to be the very lev, le'nei kol Yisrael Bereshit, the lev, the heartbeat of the Jewish people.